It's one of the most terrifying scenarios that anyone could ever face in the wild. Two hunters were on the prowl in Alaska looking for game, but what they encountered was far more dangerous than they could have ever imagined. Imagine going out on a hunting trip with your loved ones, seeking adventure and bringing back a trophy to be proud of. But what happens when nature strikes back with terrifying retribution? This is the gripping story of Brady and Steve Penn, a father and son duo who went out to hunt an elk on Afognak Island, Alaska, only to face a horrifying attack by a vengeful Kodiak bear. What happened? How did they escape? And why was the bear wanting to take revenge? Stay with us to take a closer look at their terrifying encounter with this majestic but deadly beast. Brady and Steve Penn had been planning this hunting trip for months. They had obtained the required permit to hunt on Afognak Island, which is home to some of the biggest and most prized game in Alaska. The Penns had hunted in the area before, but this time they were on a mission to bag a trophy, which was not just an ordinary elk, but the largest in North America, also called the Roosevelt elk. After months of waiting, Steve had finally won the lottery for the permit, which made him one of the few lucky people allowed to hunt for this dream animal. And of course, he wanted his son to accompany him for this once-in-a-lifetime adventure. Little did they know that their hunt would turn into a life-threatening situation, as they would encounter one of the most fearsome predators in the wild. The two spent several months preparing for their trip, which included testing their equipment, improving their shooting abilities, and undertaking intensive hikes nearby. Brady was a senior airman in the U.S. Air Force, and his father had lived in Alaska for over 30 years, which made them both confident about their survival skills. On the morning of October 12, 2021, the father-son duo was ready and waiting for their trip. They boarded a seaplane to take them to the island, where they would be left all alone for a week. Despite the increasingly bad weather, they decided to proceed with their plan. Brady's anxiety grew as he watched the approaching plane make its way through the tumultuous seas. They would spend the next 7 days on Afognak, which is part of the Kodiak archipelago and borders the Shelikof Strait. Because of the strait's notoriously harsh weather and winds of up to 90 miles per hour, emergency rescue attempts from Afognak are frequently proven impossible. After a turbulent 45-minute flight and shaky landing on a small lake, they unloaded the plane. The pair had arrived on the island safely, but the reality of their solitude quickly hit them as they dragged their belongings to the beach and searched the barren hills for a suitable campsite. The pilot gave them some final advice before leaving, and they set up their campsite on a nearby hill. The wind became an unflyable gale as the evening wore on. They would have to wait till the weather was better even if they phoned for a flight out right away. This meant they were stranded on the island for the next few days and would have to rely on only each other and their supplies. The following morning, being awoken before dawn to the chilly winds and mild rain that had been falling all night, they knew they had two options: to stay put and wait for the storm to pass, or move on into the wilderness to look for elk. They then set forth into the pitch-black, blustery wilderness. The trail was blocked by thorny plants and alder trees, making the trek difficult. They looked over the landscape as they fought their way to the mountain ridge. In the valley below, they could make out evidence of crushed grass and a barely visible animal trail, moving farther down the valley while creating a distance from their camp. They made an effort to stay on high ground, but the vegetation kept obstructing their view, and every step into the valley meant a substantial decrease in their line of sight. As their field of vision shrunk, they abruptly noticed movement almost a quarter-mile away, a herd that blended in with the browns and greens of the shrubbery. The herd of enormous beasts had been entirely hidden by the alder and tall grass-covered countryside. They thought they might have permanently lost them and were on the verge of giving up, when after stumbling to the top of a cliff, they came face to face with a magnificent bull elk, its antlers spread out like enormous limbs on a tree. Brady measured the shot while his eyes began to moisten from the howling of the wind. He only had a few seconds before the elk moved out of view or smelled them and fled. The enormous animal, which weighed about 1,200 pounds, slid forward and down the nearby hillside as the shot echoed out throughout the valley. The hunters felt relief. They had managed to accomplish their mission on just their second day on the island. However, the challenging part was to now begin, with long hours to trek to and from the camp while carrying large backpacks full of elk. The two of them were unable to move the enormous animal, so they hacked branches and small trees out of the way to gain access, processed the meat, and took it to camp. While packing the remainder in white bags that they hung from the branches of the tree, to protect from any scavengers. They left early the following morning and returned to get the meat prepared for camp. They needed to make the most of daylight, as food was scarce during the winters in Alaska, and wolves and bears would travel great distances to fulfill their hunger. However, something wasn't quite right when they crossed the valley's crest and descended into the area of alders where they had dumped the elk's carcass the previous afternoon. The bright white game bag that had been used to mark the location of the elk's fall was gone. Brady hung the bag such that it was visible from the top of the valley over the trees. Was it the wind or a bear, he wondered. They loaded around into the rifle's chamber and started talking loudly as they approached the elk from around 75 yards away, so that any scavenging animal nearby would hear them. They arrived at a little meadow 50 yards from the kill, where they were relieved to be able to move through the long grass easily once more. They began enjoying the surrounding natural beauty as birds chirped and the wind died down. Suddenly, the silence of the moment was broken by the sound of low growling and the crackling of branches like firecrackers. Brady caught a glimpse of a large bear, less than 10 yards away, barreling towards him out of the corner of his eye. Its head was lowered, ears back, eyes fixed at Brady, and was galloping through the alders as if they weren't there. Before he could turn to fire his weapon or even blink, the bear had already reached Brady. A paw reached out to him, and he was spinning in the air. He fell to the ground with his weapon under him. Brady lay powerless and in pain in the grass, with a paw pressed against his back, and the metal frame of his backpack buckled under the weight of the bear. Unable to breathe, let alone shout for help, thoughts of how he is about to meet his end were rushing to him. This was it, Brady knew it, as he gasped for air. He couldn't move, nor could he reach for the gun because it was suppressed under him, and the weight of the bear was crushing into his spine. Time paused, as he searched for a means to turn or escape the bear's paws. The large animal put his entire body weight onto his spine, and overpowered him. As he thought about any possibilities to try to survive this, suddenly weight was lifted off his back, and he heard the bear running to attack his father. He could hear grunting as his father wrestled with the animal, which had disarmed him with a single swipe and put Steve on his back, lying on the floor with the bear now on top of him. Despite being out of breath and the pain shooting across his body, Brady tried to stand up in the chest-high grass before turning around, raising his weapon, and firing it quickly. The movement was instinctive and automatic. The closest and most exposed region of the bear's anatomy, the back hip, was hit by the bullet. The bear roared, and swiftly returned to the alders after emerging from them. In the dense tree line, they could hear it roaring and crashing through trees. Unable to grasp what had just happened, Brady kept scanning the underbrush with his rifle, anticipating another unexpected attack. He watched the woods while his father looked through the tall grass for his weapon. He assessed the situation, and saw that the bear's claws had completely torn open the left side of his pants and scratched his leg, leaving it to bleed. The bear's teeth had punctured his father's hands as he was protecting his son during the deadly encounter, but the thick Teflon gloves they were wearing prevented him from suffering more serious wounds. Overwhelmed and thankful for their luck, they made their way back to the forest's edge, where the bear had emerged, stopping when they got to the ridge's saddle to make a pickup call on their satellite phone. The winds were too strong, and the earliest pickup would be in the next 24 hours. Winds were hammering their tent as they tried to sleep. All night long, Brady's thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of every noise and kept thinking about getting home. Ultimately managing to sleep after using relaxation techniques he had learned through military training. The Coast Guard and the Alaska State Troopers launched a rescue mission the next morning, airlifting the Penns to safety and taking them to the hospital. Brady and Steve were lucky to survive the attack, but they had to undergo multiple surgeries and months of physical therapy to recover from their injuries. Once safely in the float plane as they were carried home, Brady was struck by how crucial their teamwork and planning had been to them during the journey. Despite the difficulty of the situation, they had maintained awareness, and their satellite phone, backpack, and gun had all proven to be invaluable. He considered how fortunate they were to be leaving that island alive. Things could have gone horribly wrong if one piece of equipment had failed, or if they hadn't cooperated to divert and repel the bear. The careful planning of his dad and their perseverance in the face of panic were key factors in their escape. The story of Brady and Steve Penn is a testament of how dangerous and unpredictable nature can be, even for experienced hunters. It's also a reminder of how Kodiak bears are one of the most powerful and deadly creatures in the world. Nature can be beautiful and awe-inspiring, but it can also be lethal. This story is a reminder to always respect the wildlife and be prepared for the unexpected. Which bear do you think is the most dangerous, Grizzly or Kodiak? Let us know in the comments. Make sure to hit that like button if you found this video interesting, and subscribe to our channel for more exciting and deadly bear encounters. And as always, stay safe and stay curious.